Okay, good afternoon. All right, good afternoon. This is the Steve Mazzacane podcast. Welcome to Inauguration Day. And whether you are Republican or Democrat or a Trump supporter or not, the good news is this is an American day. It's kind of the transfer of power, whether it was peaceful leading up to today, where we had some, glitches along the way, which were certainly unfortunate. But the last few days, it looks like Trump has been I don't want to say appreciative. He's given a couple of speeches that were not inflammatory, talking about his accomplishments a little bit. And there are some accomplishments. We'll talk about that in a second. But not really pushing rhetoric. Now, certainly his legs were cut out from under him with not having social media. So it'd be interesting to see what he would have done these last couple of days, this last week, had he still had social media, but he didn't. So it is what it is. Today, the market is up significantly, not crazy, but not bad. And we watched, I'm imagining most people on this podcast watched most of the coverage today. So we don't have to go over too much of that. But, it was amazing to see former presidents, Bush. I know people say there were 4 presidents that did not attend their successor's inaugural, but this is the first one since Andrew Jackson. So odd thing. A little bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. Good afternoon to everyone who's commenting. Richard, what did you think of Trump's final speech? Again, the inflammatory language was gone. He didn't mention Biden, which is, that's kind of a sign that we put country over person. Here's our next guy. If you remember the letter that George Bush the first, so George Bush the first, Andrew Johnson, not John. Yes, right, not Andrew Jackson. The George Bush the first was the last president who only served one term, and he wrote a really beautiful letter to Bill Clinton. And if I remember correctly, in it there was a line that says, "You are our president" by this time. Like he underlined or keyed on that word "our." So there's this sense of, okay, we lost an election, but now we're going to get behind you. We want you to do well. Your success is our success. Now, I was told, well, not told, but there's reports that Trump did leave a note. I'm hoping it's a nice note. I would imagine it would be. I just wish we had this Trump 4 years ago. It's kind of this, let's be presidential. 4 years ago would have been nice, instead of responding to that disaster that we had 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday, and Twitter having to shut him down and Facebook having to shut him down. So was it a great speech? No. Was it a come together speech? No. It was a thank you speech. Was what it was. Then we get to Biden's speech. And, Biden's speech had all of the same things that everybody has. Let's come together as a nation. The victors always ask to come together as a nation. And in order for that to happen, the quality of empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand what they're going through, and often why they think a certain way. And I could tell you every Democrat's listening to that speech from Biden saying we need to come together, and they're not pointing to themselves. They're pointing to, the other side is crazy, and there are too many crazy people. But no one ever says, I'm the crazy one, or I'm part of the problem. And the Democrats are part of the problem. There's no question about it. And part of that is the inability to look and see, why did people support Trump? What was the sentiment that led for people to say, 70 million people to say, I'm voting for this guy after 4 years of what we saw? That's 70 million Americans. And if you're a Democrat and you're listening to that speech, instead of saying, yes, I know the country's a mess and he's going to bring us together, start saying, how can I do something differently? Because life changes and your thought process changes when you understand someone else's shoes and why they think a certain way. Why was Trump elected? And something you may not understand, but Trump did some good things. I had a conversation the other day about Fox News. Oh, no, not a conversation. It was on CNBC this morning. Andrew Ross Sorkin was arguing that we throw these false equivalents, like the Fox News and MSNBC are both crazy, so it is. And he said that's not true. Fox is stating things that simply are false. That's accurate. But MSNBC does something just as wrong. What MSNBC does is they report what actually happened, but they spend a disproportionate amount of time on the things that are negative about Trump or positive about their own guys, on Democrats. So if you go on the site, there's maybe something very good Trump did. We haven't had any wars in 4 years. Chris Murphy was all over social media talking about a nuclear war with Iran, nuclear war with North Korea. Everything's going to come to the end. He bashed Trump nonsensically, constantly. Never happened. And it may be that he was such a wild card that foreign nations were afraid to get started, but it never happened. 4 years, no new wars, despite constant claim by Democrats it was going to happen. What else? There's other things too that he accomplished. Now, some of these are accomplishments and some are not accomplishments, in my opinion. But if you list Business Insider, I'm going to go to this and read just some of the things that they list as accomplishments. One, if you're a Republican or conservative, you're very, very happy that he completely reshaped the judiciary. If you're Democrat, you're not. So that's going to be what side of the aisle you're on. He put in, obviously, 3 Supreme Court justices, but it's more than that. 220 judges overall to the federal bench for lifetime appointments. Trump is gone, but the impacts of the Trump presidency will not be gone for decades. Decades. Lifetimes. That's a significant accomplishment. Whether you are for his ideology or not, that's something a president accomplished that his supporters wanted to accomplish. The second one is the Space Force. That's a new branch of government. Probably, as much as it's kind of a stupid name, probably needed as advancements take place. So, an accomplishment. I can't knock that. Tax reform. Now, I'm not for the tax cuts that he put forward, but if you are someone who supported those tax cuts, and whether you supported them or not, you saw benefits from them. Your 401k is higher because of those tax reforms. I argued that they weren't necessary. I argue that in good times, it's not the time to have a tax cut. In good times, when people are doing well, they don't mind paying a little more in taxes. That's when you put money away and you start paying down the debt. He did not do that. So there was nothing conservative about the tax reform, but if you were an advocate for that, you were happy with that accomplishment. And if you're an advocate or not, and you have a pension or you have a retirement fund, your retirement is slightly better because of that bill. The First Step Act. This is a bipartisan act. This was a massive change to incarceration, the criminal justice system. And it didn't, change everything. More has to be done. But it was a first step. It passed Congress. I don't know if it was unanimous, but extreme bipartisan support. So there are some things here that were possible. Defeated ISIS, killed their leaders. That's significant. We all go talk about Obama killing Osama bin Laden. Trump had his version of that as well. But the difference between Fox News and MSNBC is Fox News has made stuff up, no question. And they repeated the nonsense news about a stolen election for the last 2 months. Then pretended they didn't know anything about it 2 weeks ago, and it resulted in the nonsense we saw. What MSNBC does is they don't lie. Instead, they minimally report anything positive and spend 99% of the time on anything negative, giving a drastically disproportionate view of what actually took place. And so when you're on there and their audience is primarily Democrats and you're just going 99% of the time, what a jerk this is, this guy's terrible, he's awful, all his bad quotes, all that stuff, and never go to the good stuff, you reinforce that stuff in Democrats' minds. And so then you end up with a speech like today. And that speech that we saw is, Biden saying we need to come together. The need to come together is not just Republicans. It's not Republicans have to agree with you. Democrats are the ones who have to understand why Republicans are. I'm not talking about the crazy people marching in the Capitol. Those aren't Republicans or Democrats. Those are criminals. But the ability to empathize and understand why other people think and act and behave a certain way is what will bring us together. And every Democrat listening to Biden should have said, now what they did say was, yeah, the Republicans are a mess and the country's crazy. They never put it on themselves. Instead of stopping and saying, why are they that way? Why are they thinking about those things? Chris Murphy posted, once a week. This is your weekly update that Trump is trying to destroy healthcare for 20 million Americans because of Obamacare. Okay, that's true. He didn't like Obamacare. But there is an ideological difference on who should provide healthcare. I happen to lean liberal in that regard. I agreed with Obama on Obamacare. Obamacare is a far from perfect bill, by the way. The final version was far, far, far from perfect. Trump actually helped Obamacare more, and some of the things by any more funding went to Obamacare, which is amazing. But in the end, Obamacare is stronger now than it was before Trump got in office, if you believe that, because more federal funding went to the cost of insurance policies. However, during the election between Obama and Romney had passed an Obamacare-like system in Massachusetts. His argument was, we don't want to see that on a federal level. I don't agree with that, but I understand that that's a valid argument. It's a different mentality. And so when we can sit there and say, okay, there's two different trains of thought here, and they are, maybe I favor one, but they're both intelligent. They're both thought out. And so we think of things, especially, and I see this many, many times. I was a member of the Democratic Town Committee. We are compassionate. We care about people, and they don't. That's simply not true. There's a difference of opinion of what the role of federal government should be. There's a difference of opinion on whether or not the federal government or the state should handle something. There's a difference of opinion on whether a government should handle healthcare or not. I think government should handle healthcare. I think the government should make sure there's healthcare for everyone. That's my belief. But it doesn't mean I don't understand where the other side is coming from. So when Biden gives a speech like that, we need to come together. I think he means it the way I'm explaining it. I believe that. But the average Democrat that I know looks at it as Republicans are crazy and they have to come to the table. Read some of these comments here. The fact that he's being praised for not getting into a major war in 4 years says not very much about him and a lot about how horrible U.S. foreign policy has been over the last decades, generations. Also, I'd call blowing up the head of Iran's military an act of war, even if it didn't lead to a full-blown war. Trump was no peacemaker. I'm not claiming he was a peacemaker. I'm claiming the claims that were being made by leading Democrats that he was going to start World War III didn't happen. And I've said this before. I'm not religious. I'm atheist, agnostic, whatever. I don't care what the title is. If you show me proof of God, I'm for it. That being said, I don't believe in an afterlife. I value life. War is the last thing I ever want to see. So I will put more benefit to avoiding war than I didn't know. He was a loose cannon, no question. But you've talked to any Democrat, any ranking Democrat, this guy's going to get us into nuclear war. He's going to start World War III. He's going to start, nukes are going to start going back and forth. That didn't happen. And so I give him credit when I saw constantly attacks from Democrats that was going to happen. By the way, we've spoken many times about what he's done wrong. But at this point, taking a tip from Biden's speech about coming together, part of that is looking at history and what's happening accurately. Nobody's all bad or all good. Context matters. And when we can understand context and what's really happening, then we can start looking forward. If we live in some dream world where this evil guy is gone and nothing ever good happened, and we only watched MSNBC and they only showed us the bad things that happened, that's not helping us move forward as a country. The same way watching Fox News, or now it's what's the one where the group Newsmax is not helping us as a country. But it has to start with us. The winners who get to write history can't start listening to Biden's speech saying, yeah, they have to change. They have to adjust. It's about us. Elizabeth Smith, healthcare should not be predicated on being, I'm guessing you're saying employed. I agree. There are two things happening here. We're discussing the way we think and process information and the idea of coming together as a nation versus what my personal beliefs are. My personal beliefs are, I believe in socialized healthcare. I believe everybody should get healthcare. I believe Medicare is the way it should work. Everybody gets a baseline, and if you want to pay for an add-on, knock yourself out. But everybody gets a baseline. That's my belief. And I would raise taxes 10% to do that. Everybody gets good health care, whatever you have to do to do it. And if that's the elimination of insurance companies, so be it. But there's insurance companies who make an awful lot of money handling Medicare claims. So we can still find ways to healthcare companies. So there's my personal beliefs, but there's also the way in which we process information. Biden asked us to come together as a nation. We cannot come together as a nation without understanding why other people think and believe the way they do. That's what empathy is. And in their shoes, so why do they think that way? Why do you think the way you do? Those answers will differ drastically based on where you live and income and your family and your personal history. But until we can start understanding why 75 million people or 80 million people voted one way and 70 something million voted the other way, which is not that different, out of 150, 160 million voters, we have to, if we're going to come together, if we're going to listen to Biden, we have to start understanding why other people think the way they do. And there are differences of opinion that are just that. They're valid opinions. Just because they come from a Democrat doesn't make it more valid. I've heard some of the dumbest opinions on the planet come from a Democrat. We live in a town, if you're not from Brantford, where the Democrats attack the Republican doesn't give a damn about the political games. It's the most logical, reasonable person there is. Democrats attack just to attack with nonsense stuff. Stop. And so if we're going to listen to Biden, we want to start this administration on the right foot, yeah, the Republicans are going to take some time to come around, if they ever do. But we'll get 10 times closer to what he's asking us to do if we can understand where they're coming from, where their frustration comes from. Some of it's false information, no question. But some of it's a difference of ideology. I'll go back to that Romney and Obama debate in that election all day long. It was two intelligent people with different views having discussions. McCain, Obama, two intelligent people having those discussions. So yes, I'm dying for the Republicans to put up a Mitt Romney in 4 years. Somebody that has ideas and can defend those ideas, whether I agree with them or not. Because that's what a nation really should be about. Kim, to be honest, I hope the Republicans are able to put up a good candidate for the next election, just because I truly like to have a choice between good candidates. Yes, I want to have a discussion on ideas. But coming together as a nation now is about understanding where other people feel and understanding where they're coming from. Healthcare should not be, Kim again. I'm assuming the Democrats will put up a good one too. Yeah, I can't imagine Biden. Does anybody think Biden's running a second time? I mean, there is some serious questions on whether or not he makes, at 78 years old, whether he makes it through these years. Richard, look what he did in the Middle East. He's right. There were some positive things that took place in the Middle East under foreign policy. In some cases was crazy. In some cases was good. As a Democrat, it's our job to see the full picture, not just the MSNBC picture, and not just the picture that national and state leading Democrats want us to see. We don't see them posting, man, here's something that was really good. But there were some things he did that were good. Prison reform was a huge first step. Trump did that. Prison reform. No question. Replying to Kim. I don't know what that means. Hold on a second. I want to go down these comments. Mary, so how do we know that understanding? How do we do that understanding at a broad base? Who starts the conversation, local, state, or federal? Well, Biden asked for it. So you're asking, where does this conversation start? One, you got to be part of the conversation. You have to decide to be part of the conversation. I have heard so many people say, Trump, there, I will never vote for Republican again. Then you're not part of the conversation. If you believe in an absolute, I can only vote Republican, I can only vote Democrat, I can only vote white, I can only vote black, whatever it is. If you believe in that, you should not be part of the conversation. It's like, your spouse, you and your spouse are going car shopping. He's decided he wants an Audi. There's no point talking anymore. He just wants the Audi, right? There's no logic happening. But if you have two people saying, all right, let's look at the pros and cons of this, you may still come to a different decision and have to compromise. But if you already started off with one side picked and I don't care, there's nothing going to change me, then you're not part of the conversation. But it starts with self-reflection. And then it starts with talking to people. We talk so much on social media to each other, and so often that conversation is really just based on political beliefs. We don't know that person personally. We don't know their situation. We don't know what they've gone through. But you've known this. Everybody has seen this. You have one perception of a situation, and you go sit and talk to that person, and everything changes. And you start realizing what they went through in life, and what their situation is, and why they think the way they do. There are people who have had serious problems with government-run healthcare in other countries. I get that they may not want a government-run healthcare system. There's logical reasons to be for it being on the state level. Just we talked about yesterday about the $15 minimum wage. It's not all equal. Now, most Democrats, oh, absolutely, you should have $15 national minimum wage. Well, hold on a second. What does that do to businesses in those 10 states that have less than $50,000 in median income? It changes things. It's a negative impact you may not have in Connecticut. And the reason I'm saying this is we just had Biden ask this question, can we come together? His whole speech was on unity. And his career has been bipartisan. He has worked closely with Republicans throughout his entire career. He was the vice president to Obama, and whether you want to believe this or not, Obama was a moderate. Absolutely. No question about it when you look at his policies. But it's up to individual Democrats, individual Biden supporters to say it's time to start understanding why other people think this way. Not convince them to think our way, not try to sell them on us, not rile up our base, but to stop and ask them, why do you think that way? What's motivating you to think and act and vote a certain way? That's when life changes. Richard, the election is over. What happens to the Democrats correcting the problems with the new police bill? You're talking about on a state level. I have not followed the state much yet because we're still doing this, but I'll look into that. No question. Volker, I hope undocumented immigration is not being addressed at the cost of legal immigration. So we do have a executive order going in today, and hold on a second. We have a list of the executive actions he's taking. So executive actions he's taking: 100-day masking challenge, and then mandating it on federal lands. He is stopping the withdrawal from the World Health Organization. Anthony Fauci will be the delegation. Creating a new coronavirus thing. Economy extends the existing moratorium on eviction. So that's got to be figured out. Moratorium on evictions and foreclosures till at least March 31st. That'll be extended beyond that too. Student loan payments till September 30th. I'm trying to look. Rejoins the Paris Climate Accord that we knew that was coming. Cancels the Keystone Pipeline. We knew that was coming. Rescinds the Trump's administration's 1776 commission. If you want to know the dumbest thing Trump did, this may have been it. He created this commission as a direct response to the New York Times article. It's just absurd, just nuts. In any event, there's one in immigration. Okay, immigration. Fortifies DACA after Trump's efforts to undo protections for undocumented people. Reverses the Trump administration's restriction on U.S. entry. So that's the Muslim ban, the so-called Muslim ban. He redoes that. Undoes Trump's expansion of immigration enforcement within the United States. That's within the United States, not on the borders. Halts construction of the border wall by terminating the national emergency declaration used to fund it. However, I think a key there is they are spending money or planning to spend money on border security, the same way Obama did. And then extends deferrals of deportation and work authorizations for Liberians. So I guess that's specific to that country. So there are some immigration things taking place. I think those are executive orders. He wants to do a path to citizenship. I saw an 8-year plan path to citizenship that they are proposing. I am all for that. I know Bush was for that. That is Obama's biggest regret, was not passing that. So immigration will be a big part of what happens in the next few months. Very interesting list. And this is a CNN article, and you can take a look at that for yourself. But no, look, the speech was good. And there's a line in this speech. He goes, I understand why people worry. I understand they worry about the future. I understand they worry about their jobs, taking care of their families. I get it. But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you do or worship the way you do or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end the uncivil war that pits red versus blue, rural versus urban, conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts, if we show a little tolerance and humility, if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes just for a moment. That's the line that I gravitated to. That's empathy. That's understanding why other people think and act that way. There was a spectacular book, and I'm going to find the name of it and tell you tomorrow. It was about a student who went to Brown University, the most liberal there was, and took a semester or a year off and went to Liberty, which is the most conservative school there is, religious, whatever. And it is a truly amazing, it's funny, but this idea of understanding the way other people think and why they think that way and how they were raised, and then also realizing the similarities they have. Life changes when you begin to understand why other people think differently than you. And you can only figure that out by learning about those people. That's it. You have to start talking. Pick somebody conservative on this chat. Message them. Hey, let's have coffee. And don't talk about politics for the first hour. Just get to know them as a human. Figure out what their past is. How did their parents raise them? Where were they raised? What kind of work did they do? What kind of healthcare issues did they have? Did their kids have? Did their parents have? Because all of those things play a major role in why people think and act the way they do. And there is a whole half of this country that hates Donald Trump with every core of their being, but there's a whole other half of this country that voted for him. And the only way to bring those halves together is if someone on one side decides, I want to know why the other person thought this way. I don't want to demonize them for their vote. I don't want to demonize them because they watch Fox News or watch MSNBC. I want to sit down with them and I want to figure out why. I want to get to know them. I want to know what their past is. That's how you do what Joe Biden asked us to do today. And if we learn anything from Trump, and if we want to take this step forward, if this idea of healing a nation means anything, you don't heal by a nation coming together. You heal by one person getting to know another person. The empathy in that line. And that's the best line of the speech. If we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes just for a moment. Take a half hour, take an hour, and do that. You're a Democrat, call a Republican, talk to them about everything but politics. You're a Republican, find a Democrat and talk to them about everything but politics. Don't talk about healthcare. Don't talk about immigration. Talk about them. Get to know them. That's what Biden was saying in his speech. Okay, are we still live or not? I have no idea.